Hello guys and gals, and this is a reading from The Last Unicorn by Peter Beagle, and I'm Beagle. Beagle, yeah, that's it. And I believe that it's actually Peter S. Beagle, if I'm not mistaken. Anyways, this is also later became an animated movie that really has a cult following. Anyways. Okay. Let's see, we're going to read this first. It says, the unicorn who possessed the oldest, wildest grace that horses never had lived in a lilac wood, and she lived all alone. She could never belong to anything or anyone mortal enough to want her. Not even King Haggard, with his dreadful hunger for a beauty that can never escape him. And his crippling knowledge that nothing is worth loving because everything dies in his hands. Peter Beagle was born in New York in 1939. He has published stories, essays, works of nonfiction, and 2 novels. His interest in fantasy stems from a fascination with disguise, an obsession with poetry and singing, and a childhood love of animal stories. I almost said animal science, which might be true too. And there's the title page. In memory of Louis Untermeyer and Edgar Pangborn. Okay. Okay, here, we'll read the preface. It seemed to me that there is only 2 important things to know about my fiction. In the first place, as a born hider, I have always been fascinated all my life by disguise, camouflage, shape changers, and by everything that has to be approached backwards or sideways, while one pretends to be thinking of something else. There are fish and crustaceans in the sea who survive only by passing themselves off as stones, or bits of seaweed, or as dangerous gangster types. For my own part, I tend to cultivate an air of guileless candor. It comes to precisely the same thing. In the second place, I have always been a singer. I write songs occasionally, and I am immensely vain of the fact that for some years now, I have been performing the works of great French chansonniers, Brassens, Jacques Brel, Leo Ferré, and Charles Aznavour, every Saturday night in a tiny restaurant in Santa Cruz. But what matters is that I sing all the time, usually only half aware that I'm doing it. A perpetual murmurous jumble of opera and blues, old show tunes, and southern hymns, Elizabethan ballads of murder and revenge, Hasidic minor key celebrations, and Gilbert and Sullivan patter songs. Obviously, there are no intelligible words at all. It becomes something closer to breathing or blood circulation or purring. It goes on in me all the time, one way or another. Both of these details may go some little ways towards explaining why I like to write fantasy, as much as I've ever explained it to myself, being intellectually lazy and consequently a kind of natural park for underdone thoughts. The fantasy's turn of vision suits both my sense of the world as a profoundly strange and deceptive place and my deepest sense of poetry, which is singing. It also gives me the richest possible forest of lives and happenings to move in, busy and shadowed, at home in the shadows of time. At any rate, I am advised that I start talking like that after the second San Miguel. After the third, I'm likely to announce that all writing is fantasy anyways. That to set any event down in print is... Oh, my phone just came unplugged, but I don't care. Is immediately to begin to lie about it. Thank goodness, and that is no less absurd and presumptuous to try on the skin of a bank teller than that of a Bigfoot or a dragon. But the truth seems to be that I just see like that and sing like that and always have. The most important single influence to my work is neither James Stephens or T.H. White, nor even Brassens, but animals. For me to look back at my childhood is to see very far away the flinchingly tender near a fat, asthmatic, lonely Bronx kid who read every book he could find on wolves and cougars and wild horses, who played at being a wolf instead of Roy Rogers or Captain Video. In the bath, I used to be one of Mowgli's wolves swimming in the Waikiki. No, the one Gunga, whose imaginary friend as late as high school was a black-maned lion and who couldn't breathe if he was around a house cat for half an hour. For that matter, I invariably had asthma attacks in the cold, dusty cloisters, but I always insisted on being taken there to see the unicorn tapestries. There's no book or story of mine that isn't stiff with animal imagery, animal feelings, whether the protagonists are unicorns, werewolves, and ravens, or only noblemen and motor scooters. It is no coincidence that this book I remember as having been the purest joy in the making is my collaboration with Pat Derby, The Lady and Her Tiger. I live with a lot of animals now and know 2 wolves named Lucy and Sylvester. The Last Unicorn is the book that people know who don't know anything else I've written. It will probably haunt the rest of my career. And The Crook of Gold came to haunt James Stephens. As The Crook of Gold came to haunt James Stephens. With the passing of time, it has become a sort of personal I Ching, which gives me no advice, no handy warnings, but slowly tells me things I have forgotten or hidden from myself. Smendrick the magician comes out of bedtime stories that I used to tell my oldest daughter. The little cat's name was Zoe. She died last year, very old. The butterfly is a self-portrait, and so villain of the story, though he may be, is King Haggard, with his dreadful hunger for a beauty that can never escape him, and his crippling knowledge that nothing is worth loving because everything dies in his hands. I grow increasingly shy of talking about The Last Unicorn, except in the most specific and limited ways. Peter S. Beagle, 1st of June, 1978. Okay, we're 7 minutes in, and we're going to start the story. Here we go. This is chapter 1, and we're probably only going to read for maybe half an hour. The unicorn lived in the lilac wood, and she lived all alone. She was very old, though, and she did not know it, and she was no longer the careless color of sea foam, but rather the color of snow falling on a moonlit night. But her eyes were still clear and unwearied, and she still moved like a shadow on the sea. She did not look anything like a horned horse, as unicorns are often pictured, being smaller and cloven-hooved and possessing the oldest, wildest grace that horses never had. That deer may only in a shy, thin imitation, and goats in a dancing mockery. Her neck was long and slender, making her head seem smaller than it was, and the mane that fell almost to the middle of her back was as soft as dandelion fluff and as fine as cirrus, as in the cloud. She had pointed ears and thin legs with feathers of white hair at the ankles, and the long horn above her eyes shone and shivered with its own seashell light. Even in the deepest midnight, she had killed dragons with it, and healed a king whose poisoned wound would not close, and knocked down ripe chestnuts for bear cubs. Unicorns are immortal. It is their nature to live alone in one place, usually a forest where there is a pool clear enough for them to see themselves, for they are a little vain, knowing themselves to be the most beautiful creatures in all the world, and magic besides. They mate very rarely, and no place is more enchanted than one where a unicorn has been born. The last time she had seen another unicorn... The last time she had seen another unicorn, the young virgins, who still came seeking her now and then, had called to her in a different tongue. But then She had no idea of months and years and centuries, or even of seasons. It was always spring in her forest because she lived there, and she wandered all day among the great beech trees, keeping watch over the animals that lived in the ground and under bushes, in nests and caves, earths and treetops. Generation after generation, wolves and rabbits alike, they hunted and loved and had children and died, and as the unicorn did none of these things, she never grew tired of watching them. One day it happened that two men with long bows rode through the forest hunting for deer. The unicorn followed them, moving so warily that not even the horses knew she was near. The sight of men filled her with an old, slow, strange mixture of tenderness and terror. She never let one see her if she could help it, but she liked to watch them ride by and hear them talking. I mislike the feel of the forest, the elder of the two hunters grumbled. Centaurs that live in a unicorn's wood learn a little magic of their own in time, mainly concerned with disappearing. We'll find no game here. Unicorns are long gone, the second man said, if indeed they ever were. This is a forest like any other. Then why do the leaves never fall here? Or the snow? I tell you, there is one unicorn left in the world. Good luck to the lonely thing. To the lonely old thing, I say. And as long as it lives in this forest, there won't be a hunter who takes so much as a titmouse home as at his saddle. Ride on, ride on. You'll see I know their ways, unicorns. From books, answered the other, only from books and tales and songs. Not in the reign of 3 kings has there been even a whisper of unicorn seen in this country, or any other. You know no more about unicorns than I do, and I've read the same books and heard all the same stories, and I've never yet seen one either. The first hunter was silent for a time, and the second whistled sourly to himself. Then the first said, My great-grandmother saw a unicorn once. She used to tell me about it when I was little. Oh, indeed. And did she capture it with a golden bridle? No, she didn't have one. You don't have to have a golden bridle to catch a unicorn. That part's the fairy tale. You need only to be pure of heart, rather. Yes, yes, the younger man chuckled. Did she ride her unicorn then bareback under the trees like a nymph in the early days of the world? My great-grandmother was afraid of large animals, said the first hunter. She didn't ride it, but she sat very, very still, and the unicorn put its head in her lap and fell asleep. My great-grandmother never moved till it woke. What did it look like? Pliny described the unicorn as being very ferocious, similar to the rest of its body to a horse, with the head of a deer, the feet of an elephant, the tail of a bear, a deep bellowing voice, and a single black horn 2 cubits in length. And the Chinese, my great-grandmother said, only that the unicorn had a good smell. She never could abide the smell of any beast, either a cat or a cow, let alone a wild thing, but she loved the smell of the unicorn. She began to cry once telling me about it. Of course, she was a very old woman then, and cried at anything that reminded her of her youth. Let's turn around and hunt somewhere else, the second hunter said abruptly. The unicorn stepped softly into the thicket as they turned their horses and looked up the trail only when they were well ahead of her once more. The men rode in silence until they were nearly at the edge of the forest, when the second hunter said quietly, Why did they go away? Do you think if there ever were such things? Who knows? Times change. Would you call this age a good one for unicorns? No, but I would. But I wonder if any man before us ever thought his time a good time for unicorns, as it seems to me now that I have heard stories, but I was sleepy with wine, or I was thinking of something else. Well, no matter. There's light enough yet to hunt, if we hurry. Come. They broke out of the wood, kicking their horses to a gallop and dashing away, but before they were out of sight, the first hunter looked back over his shoulder and called just as though he could see the unicorn standing in shadow. Stay where you are, poor beast. There is no world for you. Stay in your forest and keep your trees green and your friends long lived. Pay no mind to young girls, for they never become anything more than silly old women, and good luck to you." The unicorn stood still at the edge of the forest and said aloud, "I am the only unicorn there is." They were the first words she had spoken, even to herself, in more than 100 years. That can't be, she thought. She had never minded being alone, never seeing another unicorn, because she had always known that there were others like her in the world, and a world needs... Oh, and a world needs no more than that for company. But I would know if all the others were gone. I'd be gone too. Nothing can happen to them that does not happen to me. Her own voice frightened her and made her want to be running. She moved along the dark paths of her forest, swift and shining, passing through sudden clearings, unbearably brilliant with grass or soft with shadow, aware of everything around her. From the weeds that brushed her ankles to insects' quick flickers of blue and silver in the wind, blue and silver as the wind lifted the leaves. Oh, I could never leave this. I never could. Not if I really were the only unicorn in the world. I know how to live here. I know how everything smells and tastes and is. What could I ever search for in the world except this again? But when she stopped running at last, she stood still, listening to crows and a quarrel of squirrels over her head. She wondered, but suppose they are riding together somewhere, far away. What if they are hiding and waiting for me? From the first moment of doubt, there was no peace for her. From the time she first imagined leaving her forest, she could not stand in one place without wanting to be somewhere else. She trotted up and down beside the pool, restless and unhappy. Unicorns are not meant to make choices, she said. No and yes and no again, day and night, and for the first time she began to feel the minutes crawling over her like worms. I will not go, because men have seen no unicorns. Okay, well, no, wait a minute. Because men have seen no unicorns for a while does not mean they have all vanished. Even if it were true, I would not go. I live here. But at last she woke up in the middle of one warm night and said, "Yes, but now." She hurried through the forest, trying to look at nothing and smell nothing, trying not to feel her earth under her cloven hooves. The animals who move in the dark, the owls and the foxes and the deer, raised their heads as she passed by, but she would not look at them. I must go quickly, she thought, and come back here as soon as I can. Maybe I won't have to go very far, but whether I find the others or not, I will come back very soon, as soon as I can. Under the moon, the road that ran from the edge of her forest gleamed like water, but when she stepped out into it, away from the trees, she felt how hard it was and how long. She almost turned back then, but instead she took a deep breath of the wood's air, and that still drifted to her, and held it in her mouth, like a flower, as long as she could. The long road hurried to nowhere and had no end. It ran through villages and small towns, flat country and mountains, stony barrens and meadows, springing out of stones, but it belonged to none of these, and it never rested anywhere. It rushed the unicorn along, tugging at her feet like the tide, fretting at her, never letting her be quiet and listen to the air, as she was used to do. Her eyes were always full of dust, and her mane was stiff and heavy with dirt. Time had always passed her by in her forest, but now it was she who passed through time as she traveled. The color of the trees changed, and the animals along the way grew heavy coats and lost them again. The clouds crept or hurried before the changing winds, and were pink and gold in the sun, or livid with storm. Wherever she went, she searched for her people, but she found no trace of them, and in all the tongues she heard spoken along the road, there was not even a word for them any more. Early one morning, about to turn off the road to sleep, she saw a man hoeing in his garden. Knowing that she should hide, she stood still instead and watched him work until he straightened and saw her. He was fat, and his cheeks jumped with every step he took. "Oh," he said, "oh, you're beautiful." Then he tugged off his belt, made a loop in it, and moved clumsily towards her. The unicorn was more pleased than frightened. The man knew what she was, and what he himself was for: to hoe turnips and pursue something that shone and could run faster than he could. She sidestepped his first lunge as lightly as though the wind of it had blown her out of his reach. I have been hunting with bells and banners in my time," she told him. "Men knew that the only way to hunt me was to make the chase so wondrous that I would come near to see it, and even so, I was never once captured." "My foot must have slipped," said the man. "Steady now, you pretty thing." "I have never understood," the unicorn mused as the man picked himself up, "what you dream of doing with me once you've caught me." The man leaped again, and she slipped away from him like rain. "I don't think you know yourself," she said. "Ah, steady, steady, easy now." The man's sweating face was striped with dirt, and he could hardly get his breath. "Pretty," he gasped. "You pretty little mare." "Mare," the unicorn trumpeted, the word so shrilly that the man stopped pursuing her and clapped his hands to his ears. "Mare," she demanded. "I, a horse? Is that what you take me for? Is that what you see?" "Good horse," the fat man panted. He leaned on the fence and wiped his face. Curry you up, clean you off, and you'll be the prettiest old mare anywhere." He reached out with the belt again. "Take you to the fair," he said. Come on, horse." "A horse," the unicorn said. "That's what you were trying to capture? A white mare with a mane full of burrs?" As the man approached her, she hooked her horn through the belt, jerking it out of his grasp, and hurled it across the road in a patch of daisies. "A horse, am I?" she snorted. "A horse indeed." For a moment the man was very close to her, and her great eyes stared into his own, which were small and tired and amazed. Then she turned and fled up the road, running so swiftly that those who saw her exclaimed, "Now there's a horse. There's a real horse," one old man said quietly to his wife. "That's an Arab horse. I was on a ship with an Arab horse once." From that time the unicorn avoided towns even at night, unless there was no way at all to go around them. Even so, there were a few men who gave chase, but always to a wandering white mare, never to the gay and reverent manner proper to the pursuit of a unicorn. They came with ropes and nets and baits of sugar lumps, and they whistled and called her Bess and Nellie. Sometimes she would slow down enough to let their horses catch her scent, and then watch as the beasts reared and wheeled and ran away with their terrified riders. The horses always knew her. How can it be, she wondered. I suppose I could understand it if men had simply forgotten unicorns, or if they had changed so that they hated all unicorns now and tried to kill them when they saw them, but not to see them at all, to look at them and see something else. What do they look like to one another then? What do trees look like to them, or houses, or real horses, or their own children? Sometimes she thought, if men no longer know what they are looking at, they may as well be unicorns in the there may well be unicorns in the world yet, unknown, and glad of it. But she knew beyond both hope and vanity that men had changed, and that the world and the world with them. because the unicorns were gone. Yet she went on along the hard road, although every day she wished a little more that she had never left her forest. Then one afternoon the butterfly wobbled out of a breeze, and it lit on the tip of her horn. He was velvet all over, dark and dusty, with golden spots on his wings, and he was as thin as a flower petal. Dancing along her horn, he saluted her with his curling feelers. "I am a roving gambler. How do you do?" The unicorn laughed for the first time in her travels. "Butterfly, what are you doing on such a windy day?" she asked him. "You'll take a cold and die long before your time." "Death takes what man would keep," says the butterfly, "and leaves what men would lose. Blow wind and crack your cheeks. I warm my hands before the fire of life and get four-way relief." He glimmered like a scrap of owl light on her horn. "Do you know what I am, Butterfly?" the unicorn asked hopefully, and he replied, "Excellent. Well, you're a fishmonger. You're my everything. You are my sunshine. You are old and gray and full of sleep. You're my pickle face, consumptive Mary Jane." He paused, fluttering his wings against the wind, and added conversationally, Your name is a golden bell hung in my heart. I would break my body to pieces to call you once by your name." "Say my name, then," the unicorn begged him. "If you know my name, tell it to me." "Rumpelstiltskin," the butterfly answered happily. "Gotcha. You don't get no medal." He jigged and twinkled on her horn, singing, "Won't you come home, Bill Bailey? Won't you come home, where once he could not go? Buckle down, Windsocky. Go and catch a falling star. Clay lies still. Clay lies still, but blood's a rover. So I should be called Kill Devil all the parish over." His eyes were gleaming scarlet in the glow of the unicorn's horn. She sighed and plodded on, both amused and disappointed. "Serves you right," she told herself. "You know better than to expect a butterfly to know your name. All they know are songs and poems, and anything else they hear. They mean well, but they can't keep things straight. And why should they? They die out soon." The butterfly swaggered before her eyes, singing, "1, 2, 3, oh Larry," as he whirled, chanting, Not, I'll not, carrying comfort, look down that lonesome road, for oh, what danged minutes tell he o'er, who dotes yet doubts, hasten mirth, and bring with thee a host of furious fancies, whereof I am commander, which will be on sale for 3 days only at bargain summer prices. I love you, oh the horror, the aroint thee, which aroint thee. Indeed and truly, you've chosen a bad place to be lame in, willow, willow, willow. His voice tinkled in the unicorn's head like silver money falling. He traveled with her for the rest of the waning day, but when the sun went down and the sky was full of rosy fish, he flew off her horn and hovered in the air before her. "I must take the A train," he said politely. Against the clouds, she could see that his velvet wings were ribbed with delicate black veins. "Farewell," she said. "I hope you hear many more songs." With that, we are probably going to end this. We made it to page 18. And I will find a way to remember that. Let me grab something here. Yeah, we'll stick that right there. And we are going to pick this up in the next episode. These chapters are super long, so I didn't think we would probably get all the way to the end of one chapter. So I'm going to just quickly check. Oh yeah, okay. See, on page 22, so we still have 4 pages to go before we actually hit the second chapter. Anyways, we have been reading from The Last Unicorn by Peter Beagle. Technically, it's Peter S. Beagle. But yeah. If you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. And if you want to support me in any way, all that information will be in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.